The letter arrived on a Wednesday, carrying the scent of coal smoke and old paper. It bore a crest I did not know, and a signature I could barely read. Yet its message was plain. An aunt I scarcely remembered had left me a townhouse on Blackthorn Lane. There were papers to collect, a key to receive, and underlined once a request that I treat the house with courtesy. A house is wood and plaster. What courtesy could it require? Blackthorn Lane proved narrower than the map suggested, a ribbon of cobbles pressed between rows of solemn brick. The townhouse at number 12 stood a little apart from its neighbors, as though it had stepped back to consider the rest. Its door was painted a tired blue, the knocker shaped like a small hand. Ivy clung to the railings. A cat watched from the steps, then vanished as if it had never been there. The solicitor spoke briskly of deeds and taxes, but softened when he spoke of the house. "Tenants come and go," he said, lowering his voice. "They find it drafty." He passed me the key on a length of ribbon and added, "Some houses prefer quiet. This one prefers being noticed." He wished me luck, as though we had concluded not a transfer of property but a wager. Inside, dust lay in kind order. The hallway breathed faintly, cool and dry, and the floorboards answered my steps with manners rather than complaint. The front room faced the lane. The back looked onto a walled garden where a lone ash tree had learned to grow sideways for the light. On the mantel of the back room stood a brass clock that had stopped at some forgiving hour. Beside it lay a short note, *welcome. Mind the hollow. The words carried no threat, yet no explanation. I slipped the paper into my pocket. The kitchen kept to the basement. Flagstones worn to a soft shine, shelves of plain crockery, a kettle, a range. Nothing strange until a faint knock came from the wall beside the stair. Not a rattle or settling of timber, two gentle taps, spaced like patient words. I set my ear to the panel. Silence, soft as felt. By dusk, I had opened every window that would oblige and closed those that would not. The rooms presented themselves modestly. A parlor, a study with an empty bookcase, a dining room with one chair waiting for its set. On the first landing, a narrow window caught the last of the light. From somewhere high came a soft scrape, then stillness. The back bedroom overlooked the garden. On its skirting board, just where a bed might once have stood, someone had written faintly in pencil, *, leave the door on the latch. The words were not recent. I stood, thinking of the ribboned key in my coat and the solicitor's odd advice, and felt the smallest brush of air upon my sleeve, as if a door below had opened and changed its mind. At night, houses alter, corridors lengthen, stairs test their knees. The front room returned lamplight politely. The back room held it steady. The study door, however, resisted. Its brass plate hit a mechanism that shifted, then refused. I pressed it again. The wall held its secret. Near midnight, I settled in the back bedroom and left the door on the latch, because instructions are a form of courtesy. The ash tree wrote patient letters on the curtain with its shadow. The house made the sounds houses make, timbers adjusting, pipes remembering, but beneath them lay a listening I could not outlisten. Just as I drifted, a hollow knock came from the passage outside the door, soft and deliberate. Another followed from farther off, as though the first had been a question and the second a reply. The latch held. The lamp flame thinned, then recovered like a throat clearing. In the morning, the house seemed ordinary again. The mantel clock resumed at a touch, as if waiting for acknowledgement. On the small desk in the study, unlocked now in daylight, I found a journal tucked into a hidden tray. On its first page, a sentence waited, simple as a doorway. If you hear the hollow, do not answer. Instead, name the room you stand in, and the house will remember you. The journal's hand was steady. The ink faded but not broken. Its first pages described the house in gentle tones, as though the writer wished to flatter it into calm. Number 12 is a place of fine proportion, the entry began. Its stair curves handsomely, its windows face both sun and moon, and its walls listen more than they speak. The phrasing struck me, walls that listen. As I read, the house seemed to lean closer. Floorboards gave small creaks where no one walked, and the curtains trembled, though the air was still. I reminded myself that old houses breathe, yet the thought of a breath without lungs was less comforting than it should have been. Later entries shifted from admiration to unease. The writer noted faint knocks at odd hours, and whispers that hid in drafts. The hollow, one entry explained, is not a space, but a presence. It replies when spoken to. It is polite, but not patient. In the margin was a warning written in haste. Never echo it. Never ask twice. I closed the journal, unsettled. To prove myself braver than I felt, I spoke aloud, kitchen. My voice wavered in the empty room. The air seemed to pause, then resumed its usual stillness. Perhaps naming the room had no effect. Or perhaps it had, and I would know later. That night I explored further. The study, freed by daylight, revealed a false drawer beneath its desk. Inside lay a child's marble, smooth and green, wrapped in cloth as if it had been saved rather than lost. On the wall behind the desk, faint marks showed where a door had once been bricked over. The mortar was newer than the surrounding plaster. I pressed it with my thumb. It answered with the chill of stone. The parlor offered its own puzzle. Behind the clock, the wall bore scratches shaped like circles. Some overlapped, others stood alone. They were not random. They looked drawn with care. The journal explained them. The house consumes silence. Noise keeps it at bay. Mark the circles where stillness gathers, else the hollow swells. I touched one circle. The plaster felt softer there, as though the wall thinned like paper. Toward midnight, the hollow announced itself again. 2 knocks, patient as before, from the hallway. I forced myself to remember the instruction and spoke firmly. Bedroom. The latch quivered, the lamp bent its flame sideways, and then both settled. I felt less as though I had protected myself, more as though I had been noted. Sleep came reluctantly. Dreams placed me in the bricked-up room, where whispers pressed against the walls like water against glass. I woke to faint chalk dust on my sleeve. In the morning light, the parlor's circles seemed clearer, as if drawn freshly overnight. The journal's later pages grew uneven. Sentences trailed off. INK blotted where the writer's hand shook. One note read, "If you leave, the hollow waits. If you stay, it learns your steps." The final entry was only 4 words. Leave the door ajar. I walked the house at noon, when shadows were shortest, naming each room aloud as I entered. Kitchen, parlor, study, hall. Each name steadied me, though I could not say why. When I reached the stair, I paused. From beneath the steps came a low sound, hollow and deliberate, like a knuckle on wood. Once, then again my throat was dry, but I obeyed the rule. Hall. The knock stopped. The silence that followed was not empty, but attentive. That evening, I sat by the ash tree's window. The garden wall leaned as if listening to. The journal rested on my lap, open to the first page. I traced the neat handwriting and wondered how many had read these warnings before me, and how many had chosen courtesy over fear. As darkness spread, the house arranged its quiet. When the hollow came again, soft, deliberate, as though it had infinite time, I did not flinch. I simply named the room, and the house remembered me. Days passed in uneasy rhythm. I rose, named the rooms, and tried to live as though the hollow were no more than a creak of timber. Yet each night, it called again, knocks like measured speech, soft but insistent. The journal's warning echoed in me, do not answer. Name the room. The house will remember you. On the 3rd night, the knocks came from the landing wall itself, not the corridor. The sound was lower, resonant, as though the wall had depth it should not. I pressed my hand against the plaster. Cold bled through, sharper than the winter air outside. I fetched a lamp and studied the surface. Beneath flaking paint, I saw a line of bricks. The wall was not original. A doorway had once opened here and been sealed. By morning, I had convinced myself it was nothing unusual. Houses are altered. Doors are bricked up, yet unease grew. The ash tree bent its shadow toward the wall, as if pointing. I returned with a small knife and scraped gently at the mortar. It crumbled more easily than expected, pale dust spilling down. Air leaked through, dry and cold, carrying the faintest scent of earth. That night, I left a chair by the bricked wall and sat with the journal open across my knees. The hollow knocked once. Then again, slow and certain. I obeyed the rule and spoke. Landing. The sound paused, then repeated itself deeper, as if behind more than one layer. My lamp guttered, though no wind touched it. For the first time I felt the hollow not as presence, but as space, something waiting on the other side. The journal had mentioned a sealed room. Its writer described toys that rolled across the floor, though no child had lived there, and windows that looked onto walls of brick. It remembers what was placed inside. The entry reads, but not who placed it. On the 5th day I borrowed tools from the cellar, a chisel, a small hammer, and patience. I removed enough mortar to uncover a hollow sound beneath. When I tapped the brick, it answered like the lid of a chest. My courage failed me, and I replaced the dust with care. Yet, even sealed again, the wall seemed thinner, its silence stretched. That evening the hollow returned, more insistent. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. I named the room. Silence followed. Then, faint and unnerving, a single tap came from the far end of the landing, where no wall stood at all. I spoke again, more firmly. Landing. The tap ceased. The house, it seemed, tested whether I would remember. Sleep eluded me. I dreamed of a room shaped wrong, with corners that leaned inward. A marble rolled endlessly along its floor, circling, though no hand touched it. When I woke, the same green marble from the desk lay by my bed, though I had left it wrapped in cloth. I returned it carefully, speaking the name of the room as I did so. By daylight I studied the wall again. Tiny marks scratched near the baseboard caught my eye symbols, like circles and eyes, drawn in chalk long faded. They matched those in the journal's sketches. Perhaps the wall had been sealed not to hide, but to contain. The thought unsettled me more than bricks alone could. That evening the house grew quieter than usual. The ash tree's branches did not scratch. The floorboards did not settle. Even the clock on the mantel hesitated between ticks. In the pause I heard it, a faint breath seeping from the sealed doorframe, as though the hollow exhaled slowly through the mortar. I named the room aloud. The breath paused, then retreated. The house resumed its minor noises, but the silence behind the wall remained aware. I could feel it waiting, courteous yet insistent, for courtesy in return. The bricked wall would not leave my thoughts. By day its seams looked ordinary, yet at night they seemed to glimmer faintly in lamplight, as though the mortar breathed. I resisted the urge to strike further. The journal warned, it listens best when you dig. Silence is safer than discovery. Still, curiosity frayed my caution. One afternoon, while dusting the landing, I noticed something rolled against the skirting board near the sealed doorway. A wooden horse, no larger than a thumb, its paint chipped but eyes still bright. I had not seen it before. The house had offered it quietly, as though to test my attention. I carried it downstairs. On the mantel beside the brass clock, the horse looked both lost and deliberate. The journal's words haunted me. Remembers what was placed inside. That evening, the hollow knocked twice from behind the bricks. I named the landing. The reply came softer, but not gone. I returned to the mantel. The horse was gone. In its place lay a different toy, a small spinning top carved of bone. My skin chilled, though the fire burned steady. No children had ever lived in number 12, yet toys appeared like memories unasked. Ellen, the neighbor's maid, came by with bread. She eyed the house warily. "Strange place," she muttered, crossing herself. "My master says it was never empty, even when no one lived here." At night we heard feet on the stairs, though the rooms were locked. I asked if she had ever seen children. She shook her head. Only their things, left at the doorstep, then gone by morning. She hurried away before dusk. That night I sat in the parlor with both toys on the table. The hollow announced itself again 3 knocks, then 4. I obeyed and named the room. The fire snapped loudly as if in protest. The toys rattled across the table without being touched. I caught the marble from rolling onto the floor. Its green surface glowed faintly in the firelight, though no lamp touched it. The journal spoke of watchers. The writer claimed they stood where walls thinned, silent as statues, listening through plaster. Do not meet their gaze, the entry warned. Eyes are not for walls. I laughed nervously at the phrasing, but as I looked to the parlor's wallpaper, I swore the faint pattern of vines shifted. For an instant I saw eyes within the curling stems. When I blinked, they were gone. On the 6th night, I heard footsteps above me, measured and slow. The ceiling creaked beneath weight, yet number 12 had no attic, only a narrow roof. The steps crossed from end to end, then stopped precisely above the sealed room. My lamp flickered. I whispered the word bedroom. The house stilled, though silence weighed heavier than sound. At dawn, I inspected the roof. Dust lay undisturbed, timbers firm. No footprint marked the surface. Yet near the chimney, I found chalk fragments, the same pale color as the symbols scratched near the bricked wall. Someone had drawn and redrawn until the chalk broke, then left it to crumble in the dust. I returned the toys to the sealed wall, placing them carefully against the skirting board. That evening, the hollow knocked once, low and almost approving. The toys were gone by morning. In their place, pressed into the mortar, was a faint handprint, small as a child's. My own hand dwarfed it, yet the chill of the stone passed into my skin. I named the room quickly. The air warmed slightly, but the mark remained. The journal's final note for that week read, "The watchers borrow memory. They return it changed. Do not give them what you cannot spare." I closed the book with care. Already the house had borrowed something of mine, a night's rest, a measure of calm, a certainty that walls were walls. I feared what more it might ask. The chalk fragments near the chimney troubled me. I began searching number 12 for more signs, peeling back wallpaper in corners where damp had already loosened it. Beneath the faded patterns, I found marks drawn directly onto plaster circles, spirals, and crude eyes. They repeated across the rooms, faint but deliberate, as though someone had covered every surface with charms before concealing them beneath paint and paper. The journal described such symbols: noise against silence, eye against eye, drawn to keep the hollow hungry but not full. The phrasing puzzled me, but I understood enough. The marks were not decoration, but barriers. Someone had lived here who fought the house in their own way. One wall revealed a cluster of overlapping circles around the fireplace. As I studied them, the air fell still. The tick of the mantel clock slowed, stretching seconds into long pauses. I remembered the journal's line, "The house consumes silence. Noise keeps it at bay." I struck the grate with the poker. The sound rang sharp, and immediately the clock ticked again. The silence retreated like a breath let out. I tested further. When I hummed or shuffled a chair, the rooms remained ordinary. But when I paused too long, the air thickened. Once I held my breath deliberately, and the hollow knocked at once from inside the wall, impatient. I gasped out the name of the room, and only then did the atmosphere ease. Courtesy, it seemed, required volume as well as vigilance. The back stair proved richest in symbols. Beneath torn wallpaper, I uncovered a line of eyes drawn in quick strokes, each staring upward. In the middle of the stair, a loose board rattled when stepped on, as though someone had engineered a deliberate noise. I left it loose, respecting the intention. Some protections, once disturbed, ought not to be repaired. That evening I placed the brass clock in the parlor and wound it fully. Its tick seemed louder than before, firm enough to set rhythm to the room. The hollow knocked twice from the landing, then stilled, as though disappointed. The journal had written, "Keep the beat alive. If it falters, the hollow swells." I left the clock wound from then on. The toys, however, returned. The wooden horse appeared again by the bricked wall, this time with its head turned the opposite direction. I set it beside the spinning top, speaking the word landing. Both rattled faintly, but remained. I could not decide whether the house was offering them as tokens or warnings. One night I woke to hear whispering. It came not from a single wall, but from many at once, a soft chorus without words. I clapped my hands sharply, and the whispers ceased. The silence after felt bruised, as if I had interrupted a polite conversation. In the morning I found new chalk marks on the stairwell, fresh spirals overlapping the old. The chalk was still brittle in my hand. I had not drawn them. The journal's next entry was brief. When it grows restless, walk and speak. Name every room aloud. If it forgets you, you will forget yourself. I obeyed, pacing the house at dusk. Naming parlor, kitchen, hall, study, landing, bedroom. Each word settled the walls like a hand smoothing a quilt. Yet, in the sealed doorway the air pressed outward, wanting reply. I held my tongue, though it strained against courtesy to ignore. That night I dreamed of corridors where every surface bore eyes. They watched without blinking, their silence louder than any voice. When I woke, the mantel clock was stopped, though I had wound it tightly. The journal lay open to a line I did not remember reading. Asterisk, noise will fail. When it does, memory must remain. The mantel clock refused to start again, no matter how I wound it. Its silence thickened the parlor until even my own breathing felt intrusive. I struck the grate with the poker, and the hollow answered instantly. 3 knocks from the sealed wall above, slow and deliberate. The sound had weight, as though the house itself leaned closer. I obeyed the rule. "Parlor," I said firmly. The air steadied, but not entirely. Another knock came, deeper, like an echo from beneath stone. It was not merely a reply. It was the beginning of a rhythm. The journal warned of this. When the hollow speaks, do not follow its beat. It will lead you where rooms no longer end. Yet that night I could not resist listening. The knocks grew, measured 3, then 2, then 1. Pauses fell between them, long enough to suggest words forming but not spoken. I strained to hear more. The lamp guttered, shadows lengthening across the wallpaper. The vine pattern swirled into shapes that seemed almost like letters. I clapped my hands sharply, breaking the rhythm. The hollow fell silent, though the silence carried a sting, like offended courtesy. The following day I noticed cracks creeping along the mortar of the sealed doorway. Dust gathered at the skirting board, fine as flour. I swept it away, only to find more by evening. The wall trembled faintly when touched, as if a slow pulse moved behind it. I whispered the landing's name, and the trembling eased, but only briefly. That night the hollow returned with greater insistence. The knocks were no longer single or paired, but layered, one close, one far, as though several rooms overlapped. I named the landing, the parlor, the hall. Each word calmed one sound but left another. Soon the house seemed filled with knocks, polite yet endless, a chorus demanding recognition. I spoke until my throat ached. Only then did the house yield, leaving me trembling beside the bricked wall. The toys reappeared the next morning. The marble rested at my bedside, though I had locked it in the desk. The spinning top balanced upright on the mantel, though no hand had spun it. And the wooden horse stood facing the sealed wall, nose pressed to mortar like a loyal sentinel. I gathered them with care and placed them in a drawer, naming the room as I closed it. The drawer rattled faintly, then stilled. I searched the cellar for tools again, half intent on breaking through the wall, half desperate never to try. In the shadows, I found not only chisels but a ledger. Its pages listed names with dates, each line ending with a single word. Asterisk returned. Asterisk, some names were crossed out, others left bare. The last entry bore no name at all, only a mark, shaped like a circle within a circle. The hollow knocked as I read it, once, as if to confirm its authorship. That evening I tested the house. I lit every lamp, opened every shutter, and filled the rooms with sound: footsteps, claps, the scrape of chairs. The hollow waited. When at last I paused, it knocked once, sharp and final. The sound was so precise it seemed to come from inside my chest. I nearly answered aloud, but the journal's warning burned in my mind: never echo it. Never ask twice. I bit my tongue and named the parlor. The knock faded, though its memory pressed close. Sleep was shallow. I dreamed of a long corridor lined with bricked doors. Behind each came knocks in different rhythms: questions, greetings, arguments, all waiting for reply. I woke with my hand raised, ready to knock back. The air in the bedroom was still, yet heavy with the taste of stone dust. On the skirting board, fresh mortar crumbled. The sealed wall was shifting, patient as tides. The journal's next line was clearer than any before. When the hollow speaks in many voices, the watchers gather. Do not look. Do not listen too long. The cracks in the bricked wall widened with each day. Mortar dust sifted onto the landing like pale snow. I swept it, but it returned by morning. The hollow no longer knocked politely. It pressed with steady insistence, a weight I felt in my ribs. The journal's warning rang clear. When it grows restless, walls remember their doors. On the 8th night, the wall gave way. A section of mortar loosened and dropped with a soft clatter. Behind it yawned a narrow gap, dark as an unlit stair. Cold air poured through, sharp with the scent of earth and iron. My lamp flame bent toward the opening as though drawn. I should have sealed it at once, but curiosity pulled stronger. I pried at the loosened bricks until a crawlspace appeared, low and tight, vanishing into black. I crawled within, lamp shaking in my hand. The passage ran a few yards before widening into a chamber no larger than a pantry. Its walls were rough stone, its ceiling braced by beams gray with age. On the floor lay scattered objects: a broken pair of spectacles, a child's shoe, the rusted frame of a clock. Each seemed left in haste, as though owners had stepped away and never returned. Dust lay thick, yet the objects felt recent, as if memory clung to them longer than time. On one wall, words had been carved deep: "We are here still." The letters were jagged, uneven, cut with desperation. I traced them with my fingers. The stone was cold, but a faint vibration hummed beneath, as though the words themselves continued speaking. The toys I had locked in the drawer rested there too, though I had not carried them down. The horse lay on its side, the marble at its hooves, the spinning top cracked down the middle. I gathered them with trembling hands and set them on a beam. The air thickened, and the hollow knocked once behind me, close as breath. I spun, lamp raised, but the passage was empty. Still, the sound lingered in my bones. I returned to the landing and sealed the opening as best I could, replacing bricks with unsteady hands. Yet the gap still exhaled cold air, and the mortar refused to harden. The journal had said, "Do not look, do not listen too long." I had done both, and the house seemed aware. That night, footsteps resumed above me, steady and slow, though again no attic existed. The sound grew heavier until dust sifted from the ceiling. I named the rooms and turned parlor, kitchen, hall, but the steps continued. Only when I named the landing did they pause, as though the hollow wanted me to admit its chosen place. Sleep brought no relief. I dreamed of the crawlspace lined with countless possessions: coats, toys, clocks, books. Each bore the same carved words: "We are here still." 1,000 whispers echoed them, polite yet endless. I woke, gasping, the marble clenched in my fist, though I had left it on the beam. In the morning, I found new chalk marks near the bricked wall, fresh eyes staring outward, spirals layered over one another. I had not drawn them. The house had marked itself, guarding or warning, I could not tell. The mantel clock, silent since it stopped, ticked once, then fell quiet again, as though reminding me of its loyalty before surrendering. I resolved to finish what the journal's writer had begun. If the hollow could not be banished, perhaps it could be contained. I gathered chalk, candles, and the journal, ready to face the house on its own terms. The final entry waited unread, its page folded. I feared what it might say, yet I knew I would open it soon. For the hollow was no longer content with courtesy. It wanted memory, and memory was already slipping from my hands. The final page of the journal trembled in my hand. Its crease was sharp, as though folded by fingers unwilling to let the words free. I opened it slowly. The entry was brief. If you cannot silence it, remind it who you are. Speak often, mark the walls. Leave the latch. The house does not forget, but it will forgive courtesy. I gathered chalk and candles and returned to the landing. The bricked wall still breathed cold, the crawl space behind it shifting like lungs. I pressed my palm to the mortar and spoke. Landing. The air steadied, waiting. With slow strokes, I drew new circles over the old, layer upon layer until the wall bore a pale constellation. Each mark echoed faintly, as if the stone remembered the sound of chalk. The hollow knocked once, softer than before, almost approving. I sealed the gap as firmly as I could, filling cracks with plaster. Though the cold seeped still, the wall no longer trembled. I left the toys within, as offerings. They seemed to belong not to me but to the house, memories it guarded rather than gave away. In the parlor I wound the brass clock again. This time it ticked, slow but steady, as if comforted by the renewed markings above. The journal I placed on the mantel beneath the clock, its final page open to remind me of courtesy. As the fire crackled, the house sighed faintly, a long exhale through beams and plaster. For the first time it felt less like warning and more like rest. That night I walked each room, naming them aloud. Kitchen, parlor, study hall, landing, bedroom. My voice sounded small, yet the walls answered with subtle shifts of timbre, acknowledging. At the sealed door, I paused longest. Landing, I said clearly. The silence that followed was not empty, but companionable, like someone listening without need to reply. Sleep came easier. I dreamed not of corridors or watchers, but of the ash tree writing letters on the curtain. In the dream, the letters spelled my name, patient and looping. I woke with the same calm, though the mantel clock had stopped again. It no longer troubled me. Some sounds last only long enough to remind us they can. By morning the air felt lighter. The garden wall no longer leaned so heavily, and the ivy on the railing seemed less burdened. I opened the shutters wide. Sunlight poured in and lingered, accepted rather than tolerated. Yet, even in daylight I sensed the house was never empty. Its silence was not vacancy, but memory layered deep, waiting for names, waiting for acknowledgement. Before leaving for errands, I did as the journal instructed. I left the back bedroom door on the latch. The gesture felt strange, but when I returned, the house seemed unchanged, settled, even welcoming. Courtesy, after all, is not for people alone. I live still in number 12. Visitors find it odd, but they stay for tea without unease, so long as the clock ticks and the rooms are named. At times the hollow knocks once, reminding me it has not gone. I answer with the name of the room and carry on. The watchers do not trouble me, though sometimes in lamplight, the wallpaper vines seem to open eyes. I look away politely, and they do the same. The journal rests on the mantel, pages fragile but firm. I read its lines often, adding my own notes in the margins. One day another will inherit this house. They will find my words beside the earlier hand. If you hear the hollow, do not answer. Name the room, and the house will remember you. Number 12 keeps its courtesy. It keeps its memory. It keeps its silence filled. And in the quiet hours, when the hollow breathes faintly through the walls, I breathe back not as reply, but as recognition that some houses are never empty, and some inheritances are not meant to be escaped.